Good afternoon, everybody. This is Congressman Mike Levin. Thank you, as always, for joining us for another virtual town hall on the coronavirus. And we are joined once again by our good friend, Dr. Richard Garfien. Great to see you again, Richard. We missed you.
Nice to see you, too.
Well, we've now done well over a dozen of these virtual town halls. In fact, getting closer to 20 of them. And I was reminded of why we are doing these. We're doing these to present the facts in a straightforward way. Abraham Lincoln once said, and I quote, "I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended on to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts." So that's why we're here, the real facts on public health, sharing the newest information on policy as well. So we're really, really glad that you're here, whether you're on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, however you got here. We're happy that you're here, and we look forward to a great discussion. And of course, we're once again joined by Richard Garfien. Dr. Garfien is an infectious disease epidemiologist, an educator, and healthcare innovator who seeks to understand the causes of disease and translate that understanding into impactful solutions. He earned his PhD at Johns Hopkins University and his MPH at San Diego State, and served as an epidemic intelligence service officer and epidemiologist for over 7 years at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, before joining the faculty of UC San Diego, which is now, as I was just saying to him, the 26th ranked university in the United States and the 6th ranked public university in the United States. So that's pretty amazing. Dr. Garfien's research focuses primarily on airborne and bloodborne infections, often associated with health disparities in substance use, including tuberculosis, HIV, and viral hepatitis in the U.S. and abroad. His research on digital adherence technology over the last decade informed CDC and WHO guidelines on the use of telehealth for remotely monitoring patients with tuberculosis. This technology has relevance today for COVID-19 monitoring and patient support. And Dr. Garfien, in big news, you got a haircut this week. This is like a
you noticed.
But I heard that it was at your home. And, you know, my daughter, who is 6, as soon as she heard that the barbershops and the hair salons were open, she took all of our hair supplies, took them all downstairs, found a pair of her scissors for kids, and said, okay, she's open for business. So I wasn't that risky to let my daughter, my 6-year-old, cut my hair. But we have missed you. It's great to be with you again, as always. And look, this has been a difficult week, a very difficult time for our country. Great sacrifice and loss from COVID-19. But also, before we get to COVID-19, I'd like to address some of the violence that we're seeing in communities throughout the United States. President Obama had a quote a couple of days ago that I thought I would share. He said, "It will fall mainly on the officials of Minnesota to ensure that the circumstances surrounding George Floyd's death are investigated thoroughly and that justice is ultimately done. But it falls on all of us, regardless of race or station, including the majority of men and women in law enforcement who take pride in doing their tough job the right way every day, to work together to create a new normal in which the legacy of bigotry and unequal treatment no longer infects our institutions or our hearts." End quote. My great hope is that in the days ahead, our community stays safe and that we use this opportunity to whatever extent possible to create that new normal. And I hope we can do so with compassion for one another rather than aggression. Now on to COVID-19. Sadly, this week, our country passed 103,000 deaths from the coronavirus. And we're all shaken by that statistic, and we're prayerful and thinking of the families that are impacted. Currently, as I'm sure you know, the U.S. has the most confirmed cases of coronavirus in the world, with approximately 1.76 million. And as I mentioned, over 103,000 deaths. California has 107,000 cases and counting, now over 4,000 deaths. San Diego County has confirmed 7,240 cases and 266 deaths. Orange County has confirmed 6,100 cases and 146 deaths. I would note that in the last 14 days, however, Orange County has had slightly more cases and more deaths than San Diego County. And as I've said every week, these are more than just statistics. These are sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, friends, colleagues, and our hearts go out to every family impacted by this tragic virus that has impacted our world and our country. I understand that everyone is continuing to be frustrated with some of the stay-at-home orders. Everybody wants to get back to work as normally and as quickly as we possibly can. I think the key is that we've got to do so in a safe way. We've got to follow the wisdom of our public health experts, folks like Dr. Garfien, who, along with many others, have done a pretty good job so far at providing the right guidance. And in California, we have followed that guidance by and large. And in San Diego County, I've heard that because of the steps taken, we've saved well over 12,000 lives than if we had done nothing at all and just allowed the virus to run its course without taking any social distancing measures or mask wearing or staying at home. And because we've done a good job, the governor has now approved in both San Diego and Orange County reopening at the appropriate rate of acceleration given on the metrics that we're following. And look, the more we comply with those recommendations, the faster we're going to be able to get everything back to open. I am always concerned with testing. I think testing is so vitally important as we move forward. Without adequate testing, we're not going to be able to reduce the rate of infection. Without doing that and really addressing the public health issue, we're not going to be able to address the long-term economic crisis that we face. As we've said week after week, we can't have a healthy economy without healthy people. So that's my objective. In terms of how much testing is needed, both California and the counties rely on modeling that originated out of Harvard, that we should be administering a minimum of 152 tests per day per 100,000 residents. That's to be able to collect the data that we need to detect whether the virus is spreading and who has contracted it. And moreover, infected people must be identified as much as possible, and those who are infected must isolate in order to keep our economy open as much as possible. San Diego and Orange counties both have over 3 million people, about 3.2, 3.3 million people by the Harvard metric, and the one being followed by California. That means over 5,000 tests a day. I'm encouraged that San Diego County is now approaching that number. I think they had around 4,600 tests yesterday, and they've been consistently over 4,000 a day. I'm less encouraged that Orange County has been testing far less than that, about 1,300, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 a day from what I've seen. And, I have had discussions with the Orange County leadership, public health officials. They responded yesterday in writing to a letter that I had written them along with my Orange County colleagues. I'm encouraged by all of that. I continue to believe that Orange County needs to test more people, and they have capacity to do it. They say they don't have the demand, and that's why they need to encourage more people who are asymptomatic, particularly at higher risk, folks like in our nursing homes and in our frontline law enforcement positions and in our healthcare profession, food processing facilities, jails, those areas that we know are at higher risk. And I know that the leaders of those organizations, I just had a meeting yesterday with the head of PORAC, which is the largest organization representing 77,000 police officers in California, and they desperately want more testing for their members, as do virtually every other organization that I've spoken with. So we will keep at it. We will continue to fight for more testing, and not just capacity, but utilization. We're also going to fight for more legislation. And as I've mentioned in our past town halls, we've now passed a number of coronavirus-related bills. Back at the beginning of March, $8 billion to move forward on the vaccine. And now I'm very encouraged to see how that is moving forward. Then the Families First Act at the middle of March, a $200 billion bill that dealt with emergency sick leave and food assistance, nutrition assistance. That's so desperately needed. Just this past Monday, for Veterans Day, I was out near the Oceanside Airport, where I saw over 1,300 veteran families, military families, veteran families, lined up to get extra food. This is a real challenge in our community, and we need additional funding for nutrition assistance. Then we passed the CARES Act. Many of you are familiar. It's a over $2 trillion bill that aims to address both the public health crisis as well as the economic crisis. Everything from money for hospitals, state and local government, testing, and then expanded unemployment insurance, the direct cash assistance, and the controversial but important Paycheck Protection Program. Two things worth mentioning. The Paycheck Protection Program, we had a second round of funding that was an additional $320 billion. And we also had $60 billion specifically set aside for community and small lenders to make sure that truly small businesses receive those funds. We also created an oversight subcommittee that looks after not only the PPP funding, but all of the funding that we are allocating for COVID-19 at the federal level. The other thing worth mentioning is we put money for state and local government in the CARES Act, $150 billion, but importantly, smaller cities, so cities less than 500,000 people, did not receive any direct funds. And so all the mayors, the Republican mayors, Democratic mayors, all in our district came together. We wrote a letter to leadership asking them to include smaller cities in the next COVID bill. And then we passed the HEROES Act in the House, which included that funding for smaller cities, over $300 million for the cities of the 49th district. And that is a huge win for our cities. Now we need to make sure that the Senate takes the HEROES Act and revises it. I don't expect the HEROES Act, each word of each page, to make it through the Senate, but I do expect them to work on their solution in the Senate, pass something, and then let's come together and let's work for the good of the American people in a bipartisan way, just as we have on the first four bills. Mitch McConnell, unfortunately, he said that they're going to take a pause. He said that state and local government, let them go bankrupt. Then he said, take a pause. The pandemic is not taking a pause. The economic crisis in our country right now, with over 40 million people filing for unemployment insurance in the last 2 months, that is not taking a pause either. The Senate cannot take a pause, and we've got to push them. The HEROES Act, in addition to that money for state and local government, it included a lot of money for our community health centers. That's really important because they're taking care of a lot of our uninsured, a lot of those who are on Medicaid rather than Medicare. That's really important. Money for the United States Postal Service. Let us not forget, among everything else, that there are over 650,000 men and women who work at the United States Postal Service. Why save the Postal Service? Well, one reason is to save those 650,000 jobs. And of those 650,000 employees, over 100,000 of them are veterans. So let us not forget about them. Also money for our frontline workers, hazard pay, as well as money for low-income renters who desperately need assistance. So we need to move forward on this without delay. One other thing that I try to do during all of our town halls, I want to share the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I've been obviously very saddened to hear stories of increased domestic violence and other forms of abuse during COVID-19. So anyone in need can help or can call or text the helpline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That number again is 1-800-799-SAFE. Finally, before I turn over to Dr. Garfien, I have some other good news to share, and we need some good news this week. On Thursday, we announced that the United States Department of Transportation awarded the San Diego Association of Governments and the North County Transit District a grant of $11,570,250 to stabilize eroding coastal bluffs in Del Mar that jeopardize rail service through the region. The funding announcement follows a letter that I led along with my colleagues from San Diego to Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao last year. And I'm thrilled because the LA, San Diego, San Luis Obispo rail corridor is one of the most important. It's the second largest in the United States, critically important for passenger travel or commercial travel, and strategically for our two military bases. This, I think, will be a much needed infusion of capital to help support that railroad infrastructure, that track bed area, which has experienced, as everyone knows, significant erosion and really does need that support. And I'm just very, very happy that we got this done. The money will include design, environmental, and construction components. It'll help install subsurface drainage, concrete channels, storm drains, and support piles. And this Del Mar grant is the latest in a series of great wins that we've gotten for our district. Earlier, we got money for the planning, engineering, and design phase, both of the Encinitas Solana Beach project as well as the San Clemente project, to really help all along what's known as the low sand rail corridor throughout our district. And finally, along the same lines, we had a big environmental win, if you remember, with the passage of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. We got $300 million for the Tijuana River Valley pollution cleanup, long overdue to address that issue. Tomorrow night, 60 Minutes is running a story on this, and the preview of it looked really interesting. I saw Imperial Beach Mayor Serge Tadina on, and we'll see how that story comes out. I know, however, that we're actively working with the U.S. EPA to finally use that $300 million to address the issue, and it's truly a bipartisan fix. I thank Kevin Faulkner for his help as well. So it really is an example of what we can do regionally when we work together for the greater good. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Garfien for his opening remarks.
Well, it's great to be back again here, Mike. Thanks for inviting me one more time. I have to say, going back to the issue of the railway, I'm really excited to hear that, because I'm a regular at the beach in Del Mar. I have my own path to get down to the beach, and I've noticed a lot of erosion on that path because of water leaking through the cliff and down and undermining the cliff. So I think it's great that it's going to be supported. If I can make a pitch, though, for the residents of Del Mar and further north, is that they could do their part by making sure that their irrigation systems are not leaking and putting more water than necessary into the ground, which ultimately leaks out and comes out the cliff and undermines the cliff. So I think all that the work that Sandag and others are going to be doing to support the cliffs is fantastic. We really need it. And I think that the community members also play a role in making sure that their sprinklers and other irrigation aren't adding to the problem. So it's bad enough fighting against the ocean that's trying to take away the cliff. We want to make sure that we're not causing more problems on the top. So that's my pitch, and thank you for getting that funding. I think it's
you got it. Sounds good.
So I thought what I would do today is kind of take a pause and sort of say, well, where are we at now with coronavirus, and what can we be doing about it? So, the first thing is that I think we've learned by now that the main route of transmission for our coronavirus is through droplets that come out when people talk or sneeze or shout, and to a lesser degree, there is some aerosolization of very small particles that can come out when people are breathing. Those particles can fly a little bit further. We talk about the 6-foot social distancing. That's mainly to make sure that you're not in the zone where if somebody is, coughing or breathing or speaking, that you're not going to be inhaling any of those droplets. There's definitely the possibility that some even smaller particles can come out and they can float in the air and spread a little bit further. But we don't see a lot of that kind of transmission. And then the third way that it can be transmitted is through fomites, which is contaminated surfaces that somebody might touch and then touch a mucous membrane and spread some of the virus into their eyes, nose, and mouth. So I think we kind of understand, we're still learning and understanding exactly what proportion of the infections occur from these different routes of transmission is, really, really hard to quantify, but I think we're getting a better understanding just based on observation of these risks. So what that means is, that helps us to understand how to prevent transmission. And the first thing is masks. Masks definitely help to prevent the spread. So if we're worried about viral particles coming out when people are talking or sneezing or coughing, a good way to stop that is by wearing a cloth face mask to prevent some of that material from coming out and getting into the air and exposing other people. So we really have to think about, all of us doing our part to protect our communities by, wearing a mask. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, it's really hard not to be able to see somebody's mouth when you're communicating with them. We're all, there's a lot of nonverbal cues that we all use all the time, and it's unfortunate that we can't use those on a regular basis. But for now, I think it's really helpful. The other thing about that is that there's could be up to a 2-day window period after somebody is infected and is able to shed the virus before they start to feel any symptoms. And other people never feel symptoms. And so it's important to wear a mask even if you feel okay, because you could be spreading the virus even before you realize it. And so, we have to be careful there. Then the other reason to wear masks is if you know that you're exposed, that you're in the presence of somebody who's infected, you could be wearing a surgical mask or what's called the N95 respirator mask. These are more effective in preventing the virus from being inhaled. And so we wear masks to prevent transmission as well as to prevent infection. And so it's important to understand the difference there and when you're wearing a mask for what purpose. So healthcare providers absolutely need those masks that prevent the inhalation of the virus. And so it's important that we're not using those in the community because we want to preserve those for healthcare workers that really need that protective equipment. The other interesting thing is, and the reason that I sort of emphasize the masks and the protection, is that we know it works. I just heard a really fantastic statistic from UCSD. There's been over 4,000 healthcare workers in our UCSD health systems that have been tested. Only 3 have tested positive. So these are people that are on the front line. They're treating patients with coronavirus. They're on a regular basis, they're exposed, and very, very few have actually become infected. And we don't even know if those 3 were infected at work or maybe when they were, outside of work. So it shows that with proper protective procedures, you can prevent infection, and we're preserving our healthcare workers, and that's great news, and it's really important. So the other thing that we could do is social distancing. If you can stay outside of that 6-foot window of spread of virus in droplets, that's a really good way to prevent transmission. So if you're walking down the street and you're not wearing a mask, and you see a neighbor and you give them a wide berth and you stay 6 feet away, it's probably going to be okay. You're not going to spread the virus. It's a good idea to have a mask with you when you're walking or jogging or outside, because you might get into a situation where you can't avoid being, outside of that 6-foot window. And so you put the mask on to protect each other. So I think this is an important thing that we have to learn to live with for now. And that includes, this is going to be really important when we start going back to restaurants and work and everything else, is we want to say, am I outside of that 6-foot window? Am I protected from breathing in somebody else's air? The other thing that I think that we sort of realize now is that there's been more testing done, including some of the testing for antibodies that can tell whether or not somebody had been infected in the past, not just if they're currently infected. And even though all the studies that have been done have been imperfect samples, so they're not random samples of the community, they oftentimes are convenience samples, but the majority of these studies that have been done have really shown that the number of people that have been infected so far is really low. I mean, all the studies I've seen, other than maybe one in New York, have been less than 10%. So what that says to me is the majority of us are still susceptible. We can still get infected. So it's not like we can, open everything up tomorrow and expect that we're not going to get cases. So that's really important to keep in mind. So what that leads me to is the issue of opening up, and how are we going to do it? And people keep saying, when can we, and how do we do it? And I think the thing that we all need to sort of consider is how do we protect ourselves? Well, once we have a vaccine, that's going to help to protect people because it will make people not susceptible. The other thing that we can do is develop better treatments that can treat the people who are infected so that they don't develop severe disease and die. If it turns into a disease that's inconvenient and you feel bad for a week, but then you get over it, I think we can live with that. But what we're really trying to do is prevent the very severe disease and the death. So right now, and I'll talk a bit about treatment in a bit, but that's another thing that we can do to help to minimize the risk. And then, so what we're left with, since we don't have a vaccine, we don't have real good treatments yet, is in the understanding of how it's transmitted in the community and how we can prevent spreading it to each other. And that's social distancing, that's mask wearing, And then the other thing that we can do right now, which is really important, especially as we're starting to open up again, is testing. We want to be able to test people frequently enough so that if somebody does become infected, we find out very quickly, and then we can have those people in isolation so they stop transmitting to anybody else until they recover, and we can nip those outbreaks in the bud. The other thing that goes along with testing is contact tracing, and this is where every time somebody is found to be infected, then the health department and others, the whole country started trying to figure out how to do contact tracing right now. And so there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but typically it's done through the health department. They have teams of people that will talk to the case and find out who they had been in contact with during the incubation period. And then they'll contact every one of those people who they were in contact with and say, you've been in contact with somebody who is known to have coronavirus. You maybe have been infected, and we'd like you to stay at home for 2 weeks to make sure that you don't develop the disease and transmit it to anybody else in the meantime. We call that self-quarantining. And if we do that, and we do that effectively, then people can get sick, but they're not going to create these long chains and these big outbreaks of infection, and we can really keep the number of cases low. And so, when it comes to the contacts, there's a couple of things that I think are important to consider. One is that there's people who are contacts who are at high risk for severe disease. These would be the elderly, people with underlying health conditions, lung disease, liver disease, kidney disease, and people that are immunosuppressed. And so they're really important to try to get a hold of quickly to make sure that they are in proper care in case they should happen to develop a coronavirus infection. And then there's also those people that are at high risk for transmission. So people who work in supermarkets, people who have contact with a lot of people, even professors who might, be lecturing in front of a lot of people, or ministers. Those people need to be informed very, very quickly if they were exposed, because we want to make sure that they don't become super spreaders and spread the infection widely. So I think, to sort of sum up, I think that the key here is that we've got a good handle on how the virus is transmitted. We know how to protect ourselves. We know that treatment and vaccine is on its way. So we just kind of have to keep up the good work, use proper protection, and then as things open up, we'll be able to observe and make sure that if there are outbreaks, if there are people who become infected, we could jump on it really quick and nip those transmissions in the bud through contact tracing and testing. So I think we've got, we're on the right track, but we can't just open up the doors and say it's, let's go back. Well,
thank you, Doctor. That's really comprehensive, great overview of where we are, and we still have a ways to go, but we certainly have I think made great progress, and my hope is that with all the progress that we've made, we don't lose sight that it has worked, and that we just need to continue to stay the course. Everybody wants the same thing. We all want to reopen. We just want to do so in the safest way we can, and I just appreciate the continued good advice. Lots of questions today, so we're going to get through as many as we can. First from Eric in San Juan Capistrano. While many believe we should take personal responsibility for protecting ourselves, this is different because wearing a mask alone is not sufficient to protect yourself, as we need others to wear masks both in the workplace and in public indoor places. What can be done to ensure people who lack concern for others are kept away from those that are taking all the recommended precautions? With conformity, workers need rights to opt out of workplaces without ramifications if they can't be protected. Well, it sounds like what you're asking is what workers should do if others around them, whether it be workers or customers or others, aren't taking precautions. And I would only hope we could educate everybody and strongly encourage them to wear a mask and to follow the guidelines. And as we begin to reopen, there are very comprehensive guidelines depending on the business that the state of California has put out there, and those are precautions to keep the employees safe just as the customers safe. And I hopefully we'll see people following those locally. I think they're going to follow them locally. I hope they will. But local officials are going to be ultimately responsible for making sure that the businesses adhere to those rules. And we've already seen a couple examples in San Diego County and Orange County where businesses haven't, and subsequently the appropriate authorities have had to get involved. But I hope those are the exceptions. I believe they're the exceptions rather than the rule. The other thing we need is hazard pay for frontline workers. I think it's critically important, and that's part of what we put in the HEROES Act. That's why we call it the HEROES Act, to try to provide hazard pay for our frontline workers. And I'm very hopeful that'll make it to the conference between House and Senate when that final negotiation finally takes place. Here's a question for you, Doctor, from Sue in San Clemente. And she references you by name. This is good. She says, I am wondering what Dr. Garfield says about the anti-mask people's reasons for not wearing one. Here is something from one, quote, I don't wear a face mask because it's the perfect breeding ground for bacteria that can end up in your mouth and down into your lungs. Can you say upper respiratory infection? And number two, masks are not meant to be worn for extended periods of time. They can affect the amount of oxygen reaching your lungs, and well, that can lead to a whole other list of problems. You want to address both of those and other, what did she call them? The anti-mask people.
Yeah, I steer away from the anti-mask people, but I will address the 2 points. One is, are you breathing something into your mask that then you might, subsequently inhale? And I think that the logic behind that is not quite correct, because anything that's already in your mouth and in your throat is already being breathed in and out of your lungs. And so whether or not it gets onto a mask and then you inhale it is not really changing that risk at all. But I will say that this does bring up a good point, that you should wash your mask frequently after every time you use it, preferably. And also, when you wear a mask, you have to figure that it may have become contaminated with virus, either from inhaling through it and sucking virus into the outside of the mask, or breathing out and getting virus or even bacteria. You might be infected with other things besides coronavirus on the inside. And so when you take off the mask, you want to be careful to grab it from the back and take it off and then put it in the laundry. You can wash a mask, a cloth mask, in the regular laundry. Preferably the hotter the water, the better, and the hotter the dry, the better. But regular soap, and you can throw it in with the rest of your laundry, is perfectly acceptable, and that'll kill any coronavirus that might be on it. The other the other question was, does a mask restrict airflow? And that's absolutely true. I mean, if it's going to work, it's got to restrict airflow. And one of the ways that we test whether or not a mask is working is if it's tight, when you breathe in and out, you should see it sort of puffing. And that's how you know that you have a good seal around the sides. And so, we have to be careful with wearing masks. If you're somebody who has COPD or asthma or other, lung disease, and you're already having difficulty breathing, you probably should not be out where you might be exposed to coronavirus in the first place, because you're going to be the ones that are going to be highly susceptible to severe disease if you should get infected. Masks aren't 100%. We know that they help, but they're not always going to protect you. The other thing is that this concern about wearing a mask and causing health problems, I think, is a little unfounded, because healthcare workers wear N95 masks. Not only healthcare workers, but anybody that's working in construction where they're creating fine particles. So, any kind of demo or any sort of construction work where they have to wear face masks, they're wearing those N95 masks, and they're wearing them all day long. And we don't find that it's unhealthful for them to do it. It's much worse to not wear them. So my point there is that if somebody does have difficulty breathing and they can't wear a mask, that's understandable. There are some people that shouldn't wear a mask. Children under 2 years old shouldn't wear a mask. Elderly people that are on, might be on oxygen and things like that probably shouldn't wear a mask. So then you really have to consider, if you can't wear a mask, what else can you do to protect yourself? And that is social distancing.
Well, it reminded me of a tweet that I tweeted the other day, Doctor. And actually, when I was tweeting this, I thought of you. I said, I can't believe it needs to be said, but wearing a mask in the middle of a highly contagious pandemic isn't a political statement. It's about basic respect for other people and just plain common sense.
Absolutely.
So I was happy that that got over 10,000 likes on Twitter. That's good. At least I got some people agreeing with me. Jennifer from Dana Point asks, please add 501c6 to the PPP loans. PPP included loans for 501c3 entities, but not 501c6, which is every chamber of commerce in the country. We do not qualify, and we need those loans to assist small businesses to get through this. I have good news, and that is in the HEROES Act, we include 501c everything. And so that includes all of our chambers of commerce and many of the other organizations that were left out of the CARES Act. And that, again, now is sitting in the Senate, and I'm hopeful they'll pass it and they'll move it. And we'll be able to move forward for all of our local nonprofits as well as our local small businesses that need that help. Here's a question for Dr. Garfi from Eva in San Clemente. She asks, why do people think the virus is going to retreat over the summer when there are a great deal of infections in warm weather places like Ecuador, Singapore, Iran, Brazil, and Peru? Interesting question.
Yeah, Eva, I'm really glad that you brought up the issue that we've seen coronavirus in the Southern Hemisphere where they're coming off of their summer. So, sunlight isn't going to totally protect you from that. It can occur in the summer. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is still new, and we're still learning a lot about its transmission and how it's going to behave in our population, as well as how we're all behaving in terms of being in the midst of a pandemic. So people try to extrapolate from other diseases that we know more about. So, for example, the flu season typically starts in late fall and early winter and then ends in the spring. Certainly there's factors like spending more time indoors and closer to other people in cooler weather in the fall that helps to cause it to spread and would create more infections in the fall and the winter. But also between immunizations and the natural infection with the flu, the proportion of the population that's no longer susceptible gets high enough that by springtime, it pretty much burns itself out. However, in 2009, we had the H1N1 pandemic flu, and there was a big wave in the spring, and then it kind of disappeared a little bit in the summer, but it didn't go away completely. There were outbreaks at summer camps and other venues, and so the virus was still causing influenza during the summer, and then it took off again in the fall. This could potentially be due to the changes in weather, as well as people being indoors more and being closer together. And so there's a very real possibility of this happening again with the coronavirus. We know that there's airborne transmission and there's respiratory droplets. The droplets are the ones that come out of us and they only go a few feet and then they sort of fall. But the very small particles that might come out when we talk or breathe actually are so light that they can float on the air, and we call that airborne transmission. Those can stay in the air longer. They can spread a little bit further. And these are the ones that we sort of worry about in closed spaces. But they also tend to be more susceptible to temperature and humidity. And so it looks like with coronavirus, it's mostly the the droplet spread and less of the airborne spread. So, it may continue we expect that it'll continue during the summer. It might drop off a little bit because of the weather and people being outdoors. But, once summer ends and people go back to school and go back to work and come back inside of buildings, it's certainly likely to pick up again.
Thank you for that. Sherry in Rancho Mission Viejo asks, what are you doing to protect those of us in your district to stay safe? Stores such as Rite Aid here in Orange County say masks are required but don't enforce. I'm sick of doing my part to stay home 3 months now. Well, Sherry, a number of things. One is trying to provide as much good information as we possibly can. That's why we do the town halls like this. As I mentioned, the Abraham Lincoln quote, bring the real facts. That's what we're trying to do, bring the real facts. I think that these have been very informative and helpful in that regard. Number two, funding for things like testing and tracing. We've provided now tens of billions of dollars in federal funding and assistance to states, counties, and cities to help them with testing and tracing as we try to keep everyone safe. Obviously, the federal CDC guidelines are incredibly important in helping to direct the decisions at the state and local level in terms of what can be reopened and when. I don't know, I can only speak as a fellow resident of Orange County and citizen that, I wouldn't frequent an establishment that I felt was endangering public health. And I would speak with either the store manager or perhaps the corporate office if that's necessary. But I think the pretty simple thing is, don't shop there if you don't feel comfortable. And, that would certainly be what I would do. And the good thing, though, is when I've gone out, I've seen most people adhering to the guidelines, and certainly the employees adhering to the guidelines. And that's been really, really encouraging. I think from what I've seen, we hear about the exceptions rather than the rule, and most businesses are following the guidance as best they can and trying to do this right, keep their customers safe, keep themselves safe. So I'm encouraged by what I see most of the time. Dr. Garfield, question for you from Melissa, who is from Ladera Ranch. She writes, I've been very proud of our governor for the way he has handled the COVID crisis, but now I feel that he is reopening too quickly. Do you agree? If so, is there anything we can do about it? Tough question.
Yeah,
only the softball questions for you.
Well, they're so subjective. There's a lot of ways you could go with this. But Melissa has a really good question, because every time we tighten or ease restrictions, we're undertaking a natural experiment, because we don't have the answers until we actually see what happens. This is all new for everybody. We know from other infectious diseases how we think that the virus will behave, but really, and this is a unique situation where we've had shutdown orders, we've had a worldwide pandemic, people are behaving in ways that we haven't seen before, and we're not sure how they're going to behave, and we're learning as we go. And so as things open up or tighten down, we're learning as we go, and every community is going to be a little bit different. So I think it's really important to consider that. So I did a little bit of reading, and I found that Dr. Sarah Cody, who's the public health officer from Santa Clara County, and Dr. Lee Riley, who's an infectious disease expert from UC Berkeley, they both recommend that there should be a two-week waiting period after any of new restrictions are lifted, since that's how long the incubation period is for developing coronavirus disease. It's sort of like the longest of the incubation period. And so if we take some action and then we wait a couple of weeks, we can sort of see, did we get a big jump in cases? If not, okay, things are okay, that worked, we can go on. If we do see that big jump in cases, then we might need to tighten things down a little bit or modify how things are going. This is also why it's crucial that we have testing and contact tracing and tracking, which I keep on harping on, in place, so that that when there's a change in policy and people change behavior, then we can be watching and monitoring effectively to see if we get that spike in cases. If we do, we say, okay, that didn't work. What are we going to do to make it safer? Or what do we have to tighten back down? So I think, just as a reminder, in response to Melissa's questions about what can we do, the things that we can do are taking steps to protect ourselves, which is continue social distancing, wear the mask in public when social distancing is impossible, wash your hands and avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, stay at home if you feel sick so that you're not exposing your workmates, your classmates, your neighbors, and get tested, find out if you've been infected or if you are infected. So I think we all have to make our own decisions about where we feel safe and where we don't feel safe. And if a business is opening up and they're allowing everybody to come in and everybody's sitting at the bar and it's life as usual, that might be a place you want to avoid. But these are personal decisions, and I think we know how to prevent it, and we just have to, do what's right for us.
Thank you, Doctor. Tim in Rohnert Park asks or says, well, it's important to learn what's specific to the 49th district. Serving in Congress means the entire country relies upon your insights and expertise. Trillions of dollars are being spent in response to the pandemic. What amount, if any, is being allocated to address failing infrastructure and environmental remediation? Back to the district. How about an update on the San Onofre situation? Well, Tim, excellent question. And you're right. And I think we need to do more than we have done with regard to infrastructure. I was a big proponent of moving forward with a large infrastructure bill before the pandemic. And I think with 40 million Americans plus that have filed for unemployment insurance recently, last 2 months, coupled with the recent University of Chicago study that I saw that suggests about 42% of those recently unemployed will not easily find, they won't go back to that same job. They're going to have to go find another job, according to the most recent research that I've seen. That means we're going to have millions and millions of Americans that are going to be wanting to work, trying to find work. And we know from past experience that public works projects, infrastructure projects can play a significant role in getting our economy back on track. As it was recently said, we'd like to be the Franklin Roosevelt of this generation, not the Herbert Hoover. We'd like to recognize and acknowledge the need for public works projects. And I'd like to see water infrastructure. I'd like to see transportation infrastructure, clean energy infrastructure, and broadband. So important we do broadband. If we're expecting people to work from home and study from home and all the rest, how can you do it if you don't have access to broadband? Over 20 million Americans do not. And so my hope, back in January, we introduced the Moving Forward framework. It was a $760 billion infrastructure proposal. The president has said he wants to do a $2 trillion infrastructure proposal. We want to do that in the House. Let's come together. Let's make it happen. I'm all for it, and I'm going to keep pushing for it in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you for the question. Oh, and as far as San Onofre, how could I forget San Onofre? So this has been obviously a top priority of mine straight through, and in fact, before serving in Congress as well. We had assembled a task force chaired by the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and a retired Navy admiral. And we spent over a year working throughout 2019, having just a ton of different stakeholder meetings and meeting many times with the chair of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, current chair, and many other stakeholders as well. The task force did a great job compiling recommendations for the federal government, state, and local as well. And then we put that together and crafted what I think is a very impressive report that was then printed back, I think, in February, and it's ready to go. And then we were ready to release it in March, and COVID hit. And so we delayed, obviously, the rollout of that report, but we're expecting to release that report later this summer. And I'm really encouraged with all that work from members of the community who are interested. And look, I've said this before, the waste at San Onofre is a symptom of a larger problem. The problem is we lack a comprehensive strategy to deal with spent nuclear fuel throughout the United States and really throughout much of the world. And we've got to solve that underlying challenge. So I've done a variety of things in Congress already to try to address it. One is the introduction of the Spent Fuel Prioritization Act, which says of all the nuclear waste sites in the United States, prioritize moving first waste from those sites with the highest seismic risk and the highest population density. Not surprisingly, we win. It's not necessarily a competition I want to win, but we win. Look, this is an ongoing concern. During the pandemic, they continued to move spent fuel. I didn't like that. I didn't think it was a necessary endeavor during a crisis like this. I didn't think it was within the federal or state guidelines of a necessary business. One thing, if Edison wanted to have their utility workers out to keep the lights on, another thing entirely to move around spent nuclear fuel at a decommissioning power plant. But we're just going to stay on top of it. As I've said, I don't represent the interests of Edison or anyone else. I represent the interests of our constituency in keeping our communities safe, and that's what I intend to do. So much more to come on that. Here's a question for you, Doctor, from Stephen from Cardiff. As restaurants begin to reopen at reduced capacity, is it safe to eat food that has been carried through the restaurant to your table? And any other restaurant recommendations, I think, would be good too, if you've got them.
Sure, I've got a few. As far as I know, there's been no reported cases associated with consuming contaminated food. Now, that would be a really hard thing to verify because you wouldn't know whether you got it from eating contaminated food versus breathing the air that food was carried through. And so I think I'm less concerned about the food becoming contaminated while it's going through the restaurant, as opposed to you sitting next to the person who's coughing and might be getting on that food. So I did a little work, and I found out that I found a nice article by Dr. Robin Gershon, who's a clinical professor of epidemiology at New York University's School of Global Public Health, and she talks about 5 ways that restaurants pose an increased risk to diners, even with adapted guidelines that were set forth by state and federal agencies. So she talks about high traffic surfaces. So there's a lot of touch points in a restaurant that you might not even think of: doors, bathroom fixtures, railings, seating. And while the staff might do their best to try to keep these surfaces clean, these are elevated risk surfaces. So you want to be aware of that, be paying attention to what you're touching and what other people might be touching as well. Also, things like sharing condiments and utensils. So that bottle of ketchup on the table, everybody's touched it. When you're eating a burger and you go to lick your fingers afterwards to get the salt from the French fries off your fingers, and then you go grab that bottle of ketchup or the salt, they can be contaminated. So be aware of that. And I think a lot of restaurants are removing those items from the table and providing single serve portions as a way to try to minimize that risk. But if they still have that stuff on the table, just be aware that other people may have touched it. And, you want to, if you do happen to touch it, then you keep your hands out of your mouth, use your fork and knife. Don't, pick up the burger with your hands, although that's not an easy thing.
You can't eat a burger with a fork and a knife.
I've seen people eat ribs with a fork and knife. I don't recommend it, but it can be done if you're dexterous enough. If you're a surgeon, you can probably pull it off. Also, another concern is insufficient sanitation. The task of keeping every single surface as sanitized as possible, it's insurmountable. Restaurants can't afford to do it. It's impossible to keep everything clean. They do their best, and I think it's important for us as consumers to look at what they're doing and see how good of a job they are. I mean, they should be keeping the environment inside of a restaurant hygienic for all reasons. We don't want to get salmonella or giardia or norovirus. So if they're doing a good job to prevent that, they should also be effectively preventing the transmission of coronavirus. Another area of concern is shared air supply. So when you're inside of a restaurant, you're in a closed space, you may be more likely to be breathing in air that other people are breathing out. And there have been examples. I've read one in particular of an outbreak in China where people at different tables were found to be infected. There was somebody at one table who was infected. He infected a couple people at his own table, but then there were people at tables more than 6 feet away that actually got exposed. It turns out that there was an air conditioning unit behind them, and it was blowing the air towards this one table. The table to the side didn't have any cases, but the table in front actually did. So you want to be sort of cognizant of that air supply. The other thing that's, people might not think about is that if you're in a crowded restaurant where people are talking loudly, or you're at a big table, you're with a big group, we tend to talk louder. We tend to shout, especially if there's music playing and you're trying to talk over all the noise. That act of shouting or speaking really loudly is just projecting, droplets and potentially viral particles out. So be aware of that. It's probably better to go to a quiet restaurant and have an intimate dinner than it is to go to a bar that's really loud and playing, loud music or sports on TV. Not to say that those things are bad. I love doing that, but I think this is the time we have to be aware that could be riskier than other situations. And then there's interaction with the staff and proximity to other diners. So are they keeping every other booth empty? Are they spacing out the tables? Does the waiter come to your table wearing a mask versus not? These are things that they could be doing to help make things safer. And so I'll just sort of wrap this up with sort of ranking the restaurant situation as I see it. The lowest risk would be going to food service where it's drive-through or delivery or takeout or curbside pickup. You can get food from these great restaurants. You could support those restaurants, but better to take the food and eat it at home, or go out to the park or someplace where you're out in the sun. A slightly more risky situation would be a restaurant that has the drive-through and the pickup, but also they have some on-site limited outdoor seating where the seating capacity is low. So many restaurants are trying to open up their patios and let people sit outside. The risk there is probably not real high because you get good air ventilation and some sunlight exposure that can kill viruses. Next, more risky would be on-site dining with both indoor and outdoor seating, where the seating capacity doesn't allow people to have that 6 foot space in between them. And then the highest risk would be places that have indoor seating where there really isn't any distance between the customers, and there might be in these loud situations where people are it's noisy, it's busy, it's sort of life as it was before. Those are probably the highest risk situations. So I think as consumers, we have to sort of assess the risk for ourselves and try to minimize our own risk. And if you're feeling sick, don't go to a restaurant that night. Order in, stay home, don't expose somebody else. And it's possible to wear a mask in a restaurant and take it off while you're eating the meal, and then when you're done eating or while you're waiting for your food to be delivered, wear a mask. But then and when you're done with the meal, get up and go. Like, don't sit there and be in that environment for any longer than you have to.
Thank you, Doctor. Fascinating. And I had my 9th anniversary with my love of my life. My wife and I are celebrating 9 years together, and I might we've done a lot of takeout, but I might just venture out. But hopefully, things will get back to normal. Obviously, we care a lot about all the wonderful restaurants in our district, and they have been so hard hit by this. And we're hopeful that recent revisions this past week to the Paycheck protection program will help. The restaurant industry was looking for some flexibility, and we provided it this past week. And so I'm hopeful that'll help them. And I know I miss our amazing restaurants. I'd put our restaurants in the 49th against just about anybody anywhere.
And our breweries. We have
lots our breweries. Exactly right. Exactly right.
As well.
Well, I remember the Craft Brew Caucus, which is proof, Doctor, that there's a caucus for everything in Congress. But it's
keep them alive.
Absolutely right. And credit to all those who have that are just trying to do this responsibly and safely. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. Veronica on Facebook asks, my PEBT card isn't working. The number listed on the paperwork could not help me, and they referred me to San Diego County. The person at the county then said, since the card is issued by the state, I can't help you. Who can help? Well, Veronica, this is not the first or the last time that I hear a story like this where every government agency points to the other one. But come to my office or contact us on our phone number or email, and we will try to point you in the right direction. It's going to be a state issue, most likely, so we may have to have you interact with your state assembly member or your state senator. But we do that all the time. We've got great working relationships with those state offices. But I'm sorry that you're dealing with this, and it's very frustrating. And the good news is that the EDD, I think, has gotten their act together with regard to the implementation of the expanded unemployment insurance, and specifically the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Fund for those 1099 independent contractors and gig economy workers. The state of California, like many other states, basically had to restart from scratch with their computer systems in order to facilitate these new payments to folks who previously weren't eligible for them. And my understanding is they've done that, and the system is working. So I'm sorry that you're dealing with this with your PEBT card. Here's a question for Dr. Garfien. This is from Mary in Rancho Santa Fe. And Mary asks, I saw in the news that some airplanes are now flying with full or almost full flights. Even with a mask, how is it possible to protect yourself from the virus when you have other people sitting inches away from you? Thank you for taking my question.
Yeah, Mike, I think that one probably is near and dear to your heart, given that you have to fly back to DC once in a while, and so you
Correct.
probably had more experience with this lately than most of us.
And the last time there were people, I flew an American flight and a Southwest flight, and Southwest was easier to distance because you self-assign. You get on, you're able to go anywhere you want on the plane. The American flight had people in middle seats, and
Mm.
I asked some folks in the airline industry for the numbers to work. They have to have 70+% capacity to even break even on a flight. So the notion that we're going to have middle seats vacant for the indefinite future just isn't going to work in their opinion. So anyway, I throw that out, but I'm very eager to hear your answer to this question. That is true.
Yeah, thanks for those insights, Mike. I talked to a pilot on Southwest who actually told me about leaving the middle seats empty, which I thought was fantastic. But it's really, like you said, it's not going to be feasible in order for those industries to stay viable. But I've also looked into it and found that the airlines are doing everything that they can to try to really keep the passengers safe, and that includes they've always disinfected flights in between, but now they're doing an even better job of disinfecting. They're being more thorough. They've taken the reading materials out of the seat back pockets so that people aren't sharing that. The flight attendants are wearing masks. I think they've discontinued food service on a lot of flights so that they're not passing things around. And I think that's great, and I really give those industries a lot of credit for stepping up and trying to do what they can. I think we have to acknowledge that even with the best attempts, there's still going to be problems. You can't avoid having somebody who might be sick getting onto a flight, and what do we do about that? One of the good pieces of news about flights is that the air that's circulating on an airplane goes through a HEPA filter. It's a very fine filter that should remove most viruses and bacteria from the air. So you're not breathing the air from somebody up in first class if you're sitting back in coach. All that air is being circulated through a filter. So really you don't need to worry about anybody other than maybe the person sitting close to you. And then the question is, how do you protect yourself? So obviously, if somebody's sick, hopefully they're wearing a mask and trying to protect everybody else. And maybe you can carry an extra mask with you and say, hey, would you mind putting this on?
Some of the airlines require the masks, and I think that's smart. And United is now partnered with Clorox not to drink, but to sanitize the airplane. So that's encouraging as well. The challenge is there aren't the flights that there once were. On United, I normally would fly United, so I wound up doing American, and the flight was pretty well packed. On a flight that normally had 190 people, there was well over 100 people, 120 people, give or take, with middle seats filled in most of the plane. And then Southwest, the other interesting thing with Southwest is if you've been on their flights, you know that they line up usually A1 through 30, 31 through 60. That's not going to work. So they have everybody get on the flight 10 at a time. And they say, don't rush the jetway because we're not going to let you on any quicker. So they spread it all out. And then for the Southwest flights, no service of any kind. No drinks, no food, no nothing. Definitely no magazines anymore. But I never touched them before because I always thought they were people had probably spilled their food on them or something. But
yeah, that was always my last resort when the battery went dead on my iPad and I didn't have anything else to
No,
read.
you got to carry those backup batteries.
Exactly.
Backup batteries.
So speaking of that, just a couple other points for people to think about. And my daughter's planning on going back to visit a friend for a wedding in Minnesota, and was really concerned about this, not only for safety reasons, but also now with everything going on in Minneapolis. But we sort of worked through it and we said, well, what do you need to be careful of? And so we walked through the whole scene from getting to the airport to getting to her destination. And so I think we have to think about, what are you doing in the airport while you're waiting in line to go through security? You want to make sure that you're keeping distance from those around you. When you're picking up your bags off the belt, what might you be touching? When you get to the terminal and you're sitting there waiting for your flight, where are you sitting? What are you touching? When you're waiting in line to get onto the plane again. And then when you go back and you get your luggage at the end and you get your ride to your destination. All of these create opportunities for coming in contact with fomites, contaminated surfaces. So be very, very conscious of your hands. Anything that you're touching might be contaminated, so it's a good idea to bring some hand sanitizer with you so you can clean your hands as frequently as you need to. If you do touch something and you're rushing through line and you don't have time to get out the hand sanitizer, that's fine. The virus isn't going to go through your skin. Just don't touch your face until you get a chance to wash your hands or use the hand sanitizer. In terms of being close to people as best as possible, keep that 6-foot distance. If you can't, that's when wearing a mask helps. Again, we wear the cloth masks to avoid spreading our infection to somebody else. But there is some benefit to wearing a mask. It will block some of the virus from coming in, and so it decreases your chances of becoming infected. If you have access to a better mask and you want to wear that on the flight, all the power to you. It creates more protection. And then the last thing I'll just say is, I know people that will bring their own disinfectant wipes when they get on the plane, and so they'll wipe down their area, because as much as the flight attendants or the ground crew might try to clean those surfaces, they're in a rush and they might not always get everything, or somebody might have sneezed all over your keypad right before you got on the flight. So it doesn't hurt to bring your own disinfectant wipes and bring your own snacks, because as the congressman said, some flights aren't serving any food. And if you have something with you that'll get you through the flight, it'll just make your flight more comfortable and get you to where you need to be in the most safe way.
Outstanding travel tips. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it.
Right.
I have another one for you from Jessica in Dana Point. Jessica asks, the grocery store where I shop has now placed a plastic covering on the ATM keypad at checkout. Is that some kind of disinfecting material to help protect against COVID-19?
Probably not. There are sort of, antibacterial materials, but nothing's going to kill a virus very quickly. So most likely that plastic they're putting over the keypads is to allow them to be able to wipe them off with a liquid disinfectant without the liquid getting down inside the electronics and damaging the equipment. So the best thing for you to realize is that that surface and every other surface around the cashier's area may have been contaminated. And so when you're done shopping, what I do is I carry some hand sanitizer. And when I get out to my car, I use the hand sanitizer before I go in my car, so that way I don't contaminate the steering wheel and everything else. Put away my groceries. And then when I get home, I unpack my groceries, wash my hands again. So I think that the main thing is yes, you might be touching some contaminated surfaces. The only risk to you is if you put that contaminated finger in your eye or your nose or your mouth, that you might get infected. So use the hand sanitizer, wash your hands. Don't worry too much about touching a contaminated surface as long as you're aware now your finger's contaminated.
Thank you, Doctor. Nicole in Del Mar says, thank you for having these town halls and for taking our questions. I read in the Times of San Diego that you were able to direct some money towards fixing the bluffs under the train tracks. Will that money also be used to fix the beach bluffs without the tracks? Well, if you heard the beginning of the town hall, we mentioned the $11.5 million Department of Transportation grant to Sandag and the North County Transit District for the Del Mar Bluffs. That grant is specifically for the area where the tracks are and to help stabilize the tracks. But we also have secured additional funding for what's called Planning, Engineering, and Design, or PED, for Encinitas and Solana Beach and San Clemente. And those funds will go to things that aren't just adjacent to the tracks. But we have a lot more work to do This is going to be an ongoing project. I have a feeling for as long as I have the honor to serve in Congress, I will be working on the bluffs, just like we'll be working on San Onofre. And it's an honor to get to do it. We've developed great relationships with the Army Corps of Engineers and with all of our local and regional stakeholders. And we're just going to keep at it and try to keep our community as safe as possible as we move forward. Here's a question for Dr. Garfien from Jane in Vista. As we reopen, she says too quickly, in my opinion, I was wondering if doctors in the U.S. have decided on a standard medical treatment for those people who contract coronavirus.
That's a good question, Jane. So treatment in general, physicians follow guidelines, but physicians also have leverage or leeway in terms of how they treat a patient based on the patient's entire situation, what their history is, what their age is, what their other risk factors are, and they choose the most appropriate and usually, hopefully, the most effective treatments. So in terms of sort of coming up with a standard treatment, I don't know that there will ever be like one treatment that will be used for coronavirus. But in this case, there are medications that doctors are trying. And the thing about medications is that if it's been approved by the FDA as being safe and effective for one disease, doctors are allowed to try those medications for other conditions. So as long as it's an approved medication, they don't necessarily have to only use it for that condition. So doctors have been, doing the best they can using whatever tools they have available to come up with treatments. And in the meantime, there's been clinical trials that have been going on to evaluate the most promising treatments specifically on coronavirus patients to see how they work. And remdesivir, which is an antiviral medication, is one of them. It's going through clinical trials. There's been some really promising results coming out of some of the early trials. Last week, Dr. Fauci reported that the duration of disease or hospitalization was decreased by about 30% among severe patients who are being treated with remdesivir. The FDA hasn't quite approved this drug for coronavirus yet, but and so it's really only recommended in the context of clinical trials at this point. The chloroquine and hydrochloroquine that the president has been espousing turns out that it's dangerous. When it's taken in high doses, it can cause other toxicities. And so the FDA actually recommends that we do not use chloroquine or hydrochloroquine in high concentrations for treating coronavirus. There are still some trials that are going on, so it may be used in the context of clinical trials to really sort of understand how if it does work at all, but in general, it's not at this point recommended. And then there's the immune-based therapies, such as the convalescent plasma, an immune globulin. This is where blood from somebody who's had the disease can be extracted, and the antibodies from that person can be removed from their blood, and then used as treatment for somebody who has coronavirus. That's ongoing. There's insufficient data to recommend for or against it, but those trials are taking place. And then there's the interferons and interleukin treatments, which are also being evaluated. But currently there's insufficient data to recommend either for or against them. So there's a lot of work that's still going on. There's a lot of questions. There's no standard treatment yet. But as the data come out, we're hopefully getting closer to understanding what does help and what doesn't. I don't think there's going to be any magic bullet yet that's just going to cure it. But I think doctors are learning a lot about how to treat coronavirus and keep the mortality rates low.
Thank you, Doctor. Hallie in Cardiff asks, for those of us who have been furloughed during the pandemic, are there any plans for the government to engage in some kind of major jobs program? If there was ever a time where we need it, now would be that time. Well, I agree with you, Hallie. I believe that in addition to the expanded unemployment insurance and the direct cash payment and the Paycheck protection program and the other things that have been done, I do think that we're going to need to put millions of Americans back to work. Particularly concerning to me was a recent University of Chicago study that I mentioned from this past week that concluded 42% of those who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19 will not be hired back quickly. That means we're going to have to figure out other ways to engage them back into the workforce. And so I would like to see public works and infrastructure play a role in that. It's worked in the past. It can work again. Again, let's be the Roosevelt of our day, not the Hoover. Let's figure out the right path forward to get people back working and get our economy back on track. Thank you for the question. Nicholas in Dana Point has one for you, Doctor. He asked, my wife and I have been going to the same barber for years, and he has started to see clients again outside in his backyard. If everyone wears a mask, is it safe to go get a haircut outside? And maybe you want to just address salons and barbers in general.
Sure. Well, as somebody who just got a haircut this morning in my kitchen, I could say that I feel pretty comfortable with it. And here's how you do it. So in general, when we talk about the salons opening, experts are actually still saying that they're a high risk setting for coronavirus infection. Hair and nail salons can be risky, and the reason is you have a lot of people coming in, and you're within that six foot bubble with somebody else for an extended period of time. So if either one is infected, the probability of transmission can be high. And if your stylist or your nail salon person is infected, that person might be seeing many people and potentially could be exposing many people throughout the day. And so they are considered at high risk. And so if we wanted to make them safer, then what we want to do is we want to make sure that both people are wearing masks, the stylist and the patron. We want to minimize the amount of time that people are actually in that location. So wait outside until it's your turn. Don't sit inside reading a magazine and sitting in the environment where there's other people working and talking. When you're done, I know I'm one of those people that likes to visit with my stylist for a while afterwards, and we have a lot of chit chat afterwards. As nice as that is, this isn't the time to do it. So, after you get your haircut, blow out of there and, don't spend any more time in there than you need to. Also, be aware that you are touching surfaces that other people may have touched. So keep your fingers out of your eyes and nose and mouth until you can get home or use some hand sanitizer or wash your hands. Just be very conscious of being in that close proximity with somebody who is infected. So going back to Nicholas's question, can he get his haircut out in the yard with his barber and everybody's wearing masks? The risk there would be so minimally low. I think that's probably about as safe as you could possibly get. When I got my haircut this morning, Lisa wore a mask the entire time she was in our house. I wore a mask while she was cutting my hair. A couple of times she had to sort of pull it off just to get behind my ears, but I wore it the rest of the time. I was perfectly comfortable. She was comfortable, and I think it can be done, and it can be done safely.
And she knew what you do for a living. She had to be really watching every second.
Exactly. Well, I went to the dentist on Thursday, and when my dentist heard that I was an epidemiologist, she completely geeked out on me, and we talked about all the procedures that she's added to her clinic to keep her staff and herself and her patients safe. And she's really, really, absolutely gone overboard to make it safe, and I felt very comfortable being in there. And
I know a lot of our dentists were having a hard time. I was speaking with one the other day who has a major pediatric dentistry practice, and she was concerned about the supplies. She knows what to do. It's just a matter of having the PPE that she needs. It's tougher to source than it should be for her. And so I know that's a concern for a lot. I know a lot of our dentists are going to be reopening June 1st. So, coming up very, very soon. They've already been open for emergency stuff, but just for preventative, June 1st.
For sure. Well, if there's any dentists out there that want to know how to do it right, talk to Dr. Jennifer Renz in La Jolla. She's researched the heck out of it. And boy, I was convinced. She's really done above and beyond to make sure that everything's safe. And I know that the American Dental Association's recommendations have been their guidelines have been a little bit thin.
Yeah.
The California Dental Association apparently has better guidelines than the National Association. But I know that I've talked with other dentists, there's a lot of confusion about how to do it right. And so look at the California Dental Association's website. They've got better information, but talk to other dentists and get advice on how to do it. Because I think dentists, it's important. We need them, and they need to keep their practices open, and we want to support them as long as it can be done safely.
Absolutely. Here's another one for you from Kelly in La Jolla. Kelly asks, hello, my question for Dr. Garfien. My next door neighbor is a doctor at Scripps, and she told us that when she comes home at night, she changes into clean clothes in her garage before she walks into the house, and she goes and takes a shower right away. Should we also do that after we go to a doctor's office or an appointment?
Yeah, so Kelly, the reason that doctors do this is because they're treating patients who are known to be or may be infected with SARS-CoV-2, and they really want to take those precautions. And so it certainly makes sense for a doctor to, take off any clothes that they've worn in the clinic all day, take a shower afterwards, protect their family, and that makes sense. Now, if a patient is going into a doctor's office, typically, these are not the settings where a coronavirus patient is going to be. Now, if you're going into a hospital where there's known, coronavirus cases and the probability of being exposed is increased, I'd be more concerned. But just going to, a medical office, the likelihood that you are going to come in contact with somebody who's infected is probably on the low side. But even so, if you were to be exposed, if you were to, be in that environment, the amount of virus that you might get onto your clothing is probably, low or limited. And so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Plus, when you're out in the air, it's likely to inactivate any virus that's on you. However, if it makes you feel more comfortable when you get home and you want to change your clothes, by all means do it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't know that I would go to the extent of, decontaminating and taking a shower and doing all those other things, but I'd certainly wash my hands. If you want to take off your outer clothing and wash them, if it makes you feel more comfortable, I'd say go for it.
Great. We're coming up on our 90 minutes, and we've got a handful of more medical questions that I want to focus on. Make sure we get through these.
Okay.
Here's one from Sally in Mission Viejo. I know this might sound over the top, but should I wear some type of glove when I pull into a parking garage where you have to push the button for a ticket at the gate?
Well, that's an easy one, and I've talked about it before. You're not going to get the virus through your fingers, but you might get the virus if you touch the button and then you put your finger in your nose or your eye. So don't do that. Have some hand sanitizer in your car, and after you touch the button, wash your, clean your hand, and you'll be just fine. Don't worry about the gloves. Don't worry about any of that other stuff.
Here's one from Dave in Rancho Santa Margarita. Any update on the free testing available for all, both COVID and antibody? Do we plan to see that soon all over?
Yeah, that's a moving target. It's really hard to keep up with where the testing is available. I know that San Diego County has over a dozen sites that are providing free testing, and I don't think you even need to have an appointment or a doctor's referral to get those. There's a site called GoodRx, GOODRX, that has a list of all the testing sites by location, not just in San Diego, but around the country. And I'd recommend that. The other thing you can do, I know in San Diego, if you call 211, then they can assist you in making an appointment to get tested. And I'll just sort of touch on, just remind everybody again, be very aware when you're getting tested that there's an antibody test and there's a viral test. The antibody test is looking for proteins that our bodies make after we've been infected, and it's our protection. It's what our bodies make to protect us from the virus itself. So an antibody test may be able to tell if you've been infected recently or if you've ever been infected. But those antibodies usually take a week or more to start to develop. So you may actually be infected and infectious and test negative on an antibody test. So antibody tests are nice for knowing, hey, did I have it last March when I had this really bad flu and I felt terrible and I'm not sure if I'm actually immune at this point. But it doesn't tell you if you're infectious at that point. The viral test is what will tell you if you have the virus in you and could potentially be spreading it to others. And that's the one where they stick the swab down your nose or your throat, and they look for some of the virus. So when you're getting tested, make sure that you're aware of why you're being tested and which test that you're getting.
Thank you. Next one from Christina in Solana Beach. Christina asks, which of all the vaccine trials taking place do you think has the potential to be the most effective?
Boy, that's the $100 million question right there, because if I knew that, I would be investing all my money in that company right now. There are a few promising candidates out there. I'd caution anybody who's trying to second guess from the trials which one's going to come out. We just have to wait for the results. What I can say, however, is that there are public and private entities that are actively working right now on ramping up production in order to shorten the production cycle as much as possible. So as soon as one or more of those vaccines shows to be effective, they'll go into production so that we can get the vaccine out to the public as quickly as possible.
Terrific. And another one for you, actually for both of us, from Eve in Oceanside. Eve said, how would you suggest getting people to social distance that are refusing to wear masks and do anything? Well, I would say it's the same answer from before. Just continue to share the best information that we can. Obviously we've got the overwhelming majority of people that get it, that understand the importance of wearing a mask during a highly contagious pandemic. You're always going to have, outliers that want to be disruptive, but I hope that we can just act out of basic respect and decency for one another and use our common sense.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, everybody is guided by their own moral compass, and some people who are guided by, their moral compass tells them that sanctity and liberty are the most important things. When they're being told that they have to do something and that a government is telling them that they're supposed to do something, it's a violation of their rights. And so it's a natural reaction to push back on that and say, you can't tell me I have to do it. And so whether it's rational or not, they're acting on their value system, and to tell them that their values are different or less important than your own is going to create tension. And so I think what we really want to do is, rather than sort of saying, hey, it's the law, or hey, it's it's what you have to do, try advocating for social distancing and mask wearing by citing the medical institutions and the practitioners. Don't cite the mass media, don't cite what you've heard on the news, but try to find the evidence, try to find the data to show that this is working and that it's helpful, and appeal to people's sense of responsibility in that way, as opposed to saying you have to do something because it's the law, or because if you're not doing it, you're a bad person. And I think we have to try to understand that this is stressful on everybody, and it's really sort of pushing a lot of buttons, and it's really challenging a lot of our values. And so I think we have to be patient and tolerant with each other, and try to understand where they're coming from and find a way to communicate with them and that makes sense.
Well, thank you so much. We've got several questions that we didn't get to. I promise that we'll get to them next week. And I really appreciate all the excellent questions from our constituents. And I want to thank you, as always, Dr. Garfien. It is great to have you back. You were missed. The Dr. Garfien fan club they were wondering what was going on last week. But Dr. LaCroix did a great job. And I can see that she'd be just terrific to work with. And I'm sure she thinks the same of you. So with that, any final comments or remarks this week?
I think I've harped on the mask wearing and the social distancing enough. I'd say, hold the line. I think we're doing the right thing. I'm excited to see that things are starting to open up a little bit, but, cautiously optimistic. I think we are going to see an increase in the number of cases. So contact tracing and testing is going to be important. And, pay attention to the science. Don't get too caught up in the media hype. This is, it's a bug that we're trying to fight against. It's not each other. It's not politics.
I think that's extremely well said, Doctor. And I want to thank you. I want to thank our entire team, our wonderful campaign team that helps do these on Saturdays. Ellen Montanari, who sees all your questions and helps send them our way. Our wonderful video conferencing folks. Jeremy, thank you as always. And I want to thank my family. I know my parents are watching. I think we're going to try to do a socially distanced barbecue with them. That's going to be, it's going to be tough not to give them a hug, particularly for the grandkids, but we're going to do the best we can with that. I want to thank my in-laws who are watching in Tucson, Arizona, and have watched us most weeks. Really grateful for them. And obviously my wonderful wife, thank her for just putting up with me. The good news is that we actually like each other. And we like, being in the same place at the same time, and she's not used to having me home all day, every day, quite the same. But, I'm really grateful to get to spend time with her and my wonderful kids. I'm so thrilled to have gotten to spend this time helping them with their schooling a little bit and just so incredibly respectful and grateful for their teachers who have done a fantastic job during this time, where they've adapted and they've embraced the technology, and they've been able to keep our own children's second grade and kindergarten classes moving along. Very grateful for everyone at our school districts that are dealing with all of this. Very, very tough time for them. And I just hope in this very challenging time for our country that, as I mentioned before, we all act to whatever extent we can with compassion rather than aggression, with respect for one another, and kindness and generosity, which so many people in the community are showing every single day. I'm very proud of this community and all the good that is happening. Let's just stay the course, as Dr. Garfield said. We will get through this. We'll be stronger as a result. And I have no doubt that at the end of the day, we'll look back and we'll know that if we acted in adherence to a lot of these guidelines and with kindness and respect for one another, that we will have gotten through this much stronger. So thank you all for watching as always. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.